The Amalfi Coast sun warmed my skin as I dipped my feet in the infinity pool. 18 months without a break had left me desperate for this moment. Just me, the Mediterranean view, and absolutely zero responsibilities. I'd silenced my notifications except for emergency contacts. That's why my heart sank when my phone vibrated against the lounge chair. Maybe it was Mom. She'd been having those dizzy spells again. I squinted at the screen, water droplets blurring the message preview from Theo. Subject line, immediate changes to orchestra leadership. My stomach clenched. Why would the administration director be emailing me during my first vacation in years? I tapped the notification, nearly dropping my phone into the pool as I read. Aveline. After careful consideration regarding the future direction of the Philharmonic, we're implementing immediate organizational changes. Effective immediately, you are being demoted from principal conductor to assistant conductor. Your replacement, Gustav, begins Monday. Your salary will be adjusted accordingly, -35%. Despite this transition, the board expects your programs for next season by Wednesday for our donor showcase. Please forward all your preparation materials to Gustav upon your return. We trust you will handle this transition with professionalism. Regards, Theo. My vision blurred. The infinity pool, the sparkling sea below, the pastel buildings of Positano, all of it swirled into a nauseating kaleidoscope. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, 13 consecutive, sold-out performances. Critics calling my interpretations transformative and career-defining, all erased with a single email. I knew exactly what was happening. Theo had been livid when the Musical Observer wrote that our orchestra's meteoric rise from regional obscurity to international recognition is almost entirely attributable to Aveline Rousseau's revolutionary interpretation techniques, rather than administration's supposedly visionary leadership. He'd been waiting for me to leave the country, to be vulnerable, to have no immediate recourse. My hands trembled as I typed a reply. I need the weekend to process this unexpected news. We'll respond properly Monday. His response came instantly. Take all the time you need. Just send over your notation keys and season outlines before Monday. Gustav will need them for the donor preview. The audacity stole my breath. He wasn't just stealing my position. He needed my work, my unique system, my artistic vision to impress the donors. Without my framework, neither he nor this Gustav would have anything to present. I turned off my phone and stared at the horizon, my vacation utterly destroyed. Before I continue further with what happened next, I want to thank you for choosing this story. If you're enjoying it so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more orchestrated revenge stories like this one. Your comments mean the world to me. They help me understand what resonates with you. Now, let's get back to how my supposed paradise turned into a carefully conducted symphony of retribution. My name is Aveline Rousseau. I wasn't born into music. I clawed my way into it. Growing up in a tiny apartment where the neighbors' arguments provided more consistent background noise than any lullaby, I discovered classical music through a retired piano teacher who lived downstairs. Miss Lark heard me humming perfectly pitched melodies at age 6 and offered to teach me for free. By 16, I'd won 3 national competitions on piano, but my hands were too small for the most technically demanding pieces. That's when I discovered conducting, where my true gift lay not in execution, but in interpretation. I could hear layers in music others missed, could visualize how to bring out emotional textures that lay dormant in standard performances. I graduated top of my class at conservatory, then spent 8 years working with increasingly prestigious orchestras across 3 countries. When the Philharmonic offered me the principal conductor position 3 years ago, I nearly declined. They were struggling, underfunded, with aging musicians resistant to innovation. But I saw potential where others saw decay. I developed a unique notational system, something that went beyond standard musical notation. My method involved color-coded markings, unconventional dynamic indicators, and timing annotations that transformed how musicians approached familiar pieces. The first season, attendance increased 37%. By year 3, we were selling out every performance, with critics traveling from major cities to witness our revolutionary interpretations. What no one outside the orchestra understood was how much my unique system underpinned this success. Theo originally championed me, took credit for discovering me, but as acclaim shifted toward my contributions rather than his visionary leadership, His support curdled into resentment. 2 months before my vacation, he cornered me after a particularly triumphant performance of Stravinsky. "Quite the show tonight," he said, his smile tight. Though perhaps a touch too experimental in the third movement, several board members mentioned it. "Really? Which ones?" I asked, knowing he was lying. The audience seemed quite moved by that section. "Just concerns. Nothing serious." He adjusted his tie. "By the way, my nephew Gustav just completed his conducting fellowship at Eastman. Brilliant young man. I've invited him to observe our process." I should have seen it then. The warning signs. Gustav began appearing at rehearsals, watching from the wings, taking notes. Young, handsome, traditionally trained, the perfect, uncontroversial replacement. What Theo didn't understand, what he couldn't possibly know, was that my system wasn't transferable, not without my explicit guidance. During contract negotiations the previous year, my lawyer had insisted on one peculiar clause. All unique notational systems and interpretative methods developed by the conductor remain her intellectual property and require explicit permission for use by third parties. The board had dismissed it as standard artistic protection language. Theo had barely glanced at it before approving. Why would he care about technical minutiae when he was focused on budgets and donor relations? That night in Positano, I sat on my balcony watching lights twinkle along the coastline. I could fight this, beg for my position back, plead my case to sympathetic board members. That's exactly what Theo expected. For me to grovel, to compromise, to accept some humiliating partial reinstatement. My phone buzzed again. A message from Luisa, our first violinist. "Is it true? Gustav just emailed everyone saying he's taking over Monday. What's happening?" Then another from Miguel, principal cellist. "The entire string section is in revolt. We're meeting tonight. Tell us what to do." I realized Theo had miscalculated badly. He thought the orchestra was loyal to the institution, not to me. He was wrong, but having the musicians protest wouldn't be enough. The board controlled the money, and Theo controlled the board. I needed something irrefutable, something that couldn't be argued away or politicized. That's when I remembered the contract clause. My system, the very foundation of our recent success, was legally mine, not the orchestra's, not Theo's, and certainly not Gustav's. I opened my laptop and began drafting a letter. Not a resignation, not a threat, just a straightforward intellectual property notification. My heart raced with a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. Was I really going to risk everything I'd built? Was I prepared to detonate my career for the sake of justice? The donor showcase was scheduled for Wednesday, just 4 days away. Every piece utilized my notation system. Without it, the musicians couldn't perform a single measure as rehearsed. Gustav couldn't interpret my markings. No one could. That was the entire point of my system. If I withdrew permission to use my intellectual property, the showcase would collapse. The season would collapse. The orchestra might even collapse. I closed my laptop without sending anything. Was revenge worth destroying what I loved? That night, I barely slept. At dawn, I walked down to the beach, letting the gentle waves lap at my ankles as the sun crested the horizon. I thought about all those childhood days practicing while other kids played outside, the scholarships I'd fought for, the competitions where judges said I was technically proficient but lacks the necessary gravitas, code for too female, too young. I'd earned my position through talent and relentless work, not connections or privilege. What Theo was doing wasn't just unfair, it was theft. Theft of my opportunity, my artistic vision, my future. I returned to my hotel room, sat down at the small desk overlooking the sea, and reopened my laptop. The words flowed now, clear and precise. I outlined exactly which elements of my system were protected, cited the relevant contract clauses, and formally withdrew permission for use by any conductor other than myself. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I did this, there would be no going back. I pressed send. The message whooshed away with a finality that left me lightheaded. I titled the email simply, "As requested." The intellectual property notification was the only attachment. I shut my laptop, walked to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face. My reflection stared back, eyes wide with the enormity of what I'd just done. 3 years of work, possibly my entire career, balanced on the edge of a knife. My phone immediately lit up with a call from Theo. I silenced it and placed it face down on the nightstand. Then I did something that surprised even me. I changed into my swimsuit, grabbed a towel, and headed to the beach. If my career was about to implode, I might as well enjoy these last moments of my vacation. The Mediterranean wrapped around me like liquid silk as I swam further from shore than I'd ever dared. When exhaustion finally caught up, I floated on my back, staring at the cloudless sky. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to simply exist, not planning, not analyzing, not striving. Upon returning to my room hours later, I discovered 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. I ignored them all and ordered room service. Whatever tsunami I'd unleashed could wait until tomorrow. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke to 93 notifications. My thumb hovered over the screen before I decisively powered off my phone entirely. I had 2 days left of my vacation, and I intended to savor them. I spent that day exploring Positano's winding streets, eating gelato, and admiring local artwork. On my final day, I took a boat tour around the coast, marveling at the rugged beauty of the cliffs meeting the sea. Not once did I check my messages. Only when my flight touched down back home did I finally power on my phone. It immediately began vibrating continuously as a backlog of notifications flooded in. 47 missed calls from the CEO, Ileana. 23 voicemails. 61 text messages. The timing couldn't have been worse for them. The donor showcase was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Every piece utilized my notation system. Without it, the musicians couldn't perform a single measure as rehearsed. The first message from Ileana, timestamped minutes after I'd sent the notification. Call me immediately. The most recent, sent just an hour ago. Please, Aveline, we'll do anything. Just call me back. As I walked through the terminal, my phone rang again. Ileana, I answered without speaking. Aveline? Thank God. Where are you? Her voice cracked with stress. Just landed, I said simply. We need to meet. Now. Tonight. The showcase is tomorrow. And, she stopped herself. Please. It's urgent. I'm tired from traveling, I replied evenly. I can meet you at the concert hall at 9 tomorrow morning. That's cutting it extremely close. The donors arrive at 11. 9 tomorrow or not at all. A pause. Fine. 9 it is. I hung up without saying goodbye. When I arrived home, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a handwritten note from Miguel, our principal cellist. Aveline, we're with you. Whatever you need. Word has spread about what Theo tried to do. The entire orchestra is ready to walk if they don't reinstate you. Just say the word. I pressed the note to my chest, unexpectedly moved. In all my strategic calculations, I hadn't accounted for simple loyalty. That night, I unpacked slowly, laid out my most commanding outfit for tomorrow, and reviewed my options. I needed to appear completely in control, regardless of how this played out. At exactly 9 the next morning, I walked into the concert hall. The atmosphere vibrated with tension. Musicians huddled in small groups, whispering urgently. They fell silent as I passed, offering nods of solidarity. Ileana, Theo, and 3 board members waited for me on the stage. Theo's face was ashen, his usual swagger replaced by a nervous twitch. Aveline. Ileana stepped forward. Thank you for coming. I noticed Gustav sitting alone in the front row of the otherwise empty hall, looking uncomfortable in an ill-fitting suit. I set my bag down carefully. You wanted to meet. Ileana glanced at the board members, then back to me. There seems to have been a misunderstanding regarding your position. No misunderstanding, I replied. Theo informed me I was demoted, effective immediately. He instructed me to hand over my intellectual property to Gustav. I simply clarified that my notational system remains mine, as per my contract. Theo stepped forward. Now look, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. Just give us the damn key to your system so we can get through today's showcase, and we can discuss your concerns later. A muscle in my jaw twitched. My concerns? You mean my illegal demotion, the violation of my contract, the attempt to appropriate my intellectual property? The oldest board member, Harriet, cleared her throat. Miss Rousseau, perhaps we've all acted hastily. The board never formally approved these changes. My eyebrows rose. Really? So Theo acted unilaterally? Theo's face flushed crimson. I was acting in the orchestra's best interest. Her experimental methods are alienating traditional donors. We need stability, not constant innovation. Our sold-out performances and critical acclaim suggest otherwise, I countered. Ilyana stepped between us. Regardless of how we got here, we have a more immediate problem. The donor showcase starts in 2 hours. We have 76 major donors arriving, expecting to hear the program that's been advertised for months. Without your notational system, the musicians can't perform as prepared. I let the silence stretch, feeling the power dynamics shift with each passing second. What exactly are you proposing? I finally asked. Ilyana shot Theo a warning glance before he could speak. Full reinstatement as principal conductor. Immediate reversal of all changes to your compensation. A formal apology from the administration. That merely returns me to where I was before Theo's actions, I noted. It doesn't address the harm done or prevent future attempts. Gustav suddenly stood. I didn't know, he blurted out. I swear, Uncle Theo told me the position was opening because you were considering other offers. I would never have agreed to this otherwise. I studied him. Young, talented, clearly mortified. Another pawn in Theo's game. I believe you, I said simply. Harriet stepped forward. What would it take, Miss Russo? The showcase begins in less than 2 hours. We have millions in potential donations at stake. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been calculating since reading Theo's email on that infinity pool deck. I have conditions, I said, non-negotiable ones. The tension in the room thickened. Everyone leaned forward slightly, waiting. First, a new 5-year contract, with a 50% increase in compensation. Theo started to object, but Harriet silenced him with a sharp gesture. Second, complete artistic control. My programming decisions are final. Ilyana nodded cautiously. Third, I continued, my voice steady. Theo resigns, effective immediately. The words dropped like stones into still water. Theo lunged forward. This is absurd. You can't possibly… Fourth, I cut across him. My intellectual property remains mine, but the orchestra receives exclusive rights to perform under my system during my tenure. Harriet and the other board members exchanged glances. Fifth, and finally, I said, reaching into my bag, I want this. I pulled out a folder and placed it on the music stand before me. What is that? Ilyana asked. I opened it, revealing several pages of what appeared to be financial records. Let's call it Insurance Against Future Misunderstandings. Theo went completely still. Where did you get those? I smiled thinly. The air in the concert hall seemed to crystallize around us. The board members looked confused, but Theo and Ilyana had both gone pale. You have exactly 10 minutes to decide, I said, checking my watch. After that, I walk out, and you can explain to your donors why they're getting an unprepared, stripped-down performance instead of the revolutionary program they were promised. I turned and walked to the edge of the stage, leaving them to huddle and whisper urgently. The musicians watched from the wings, a mixture of concern and admiration on their faces. Miguel approached cautiously. What's in the folder? He whispered. I gave him a subtle shake of my head. Not now. Exactly 9 minutes later, Harriet approached me. We accept your terms, with one modification. Theo will be reassigned, not terminated, for appearance's sake. Reassigned where? I asked. A ghost of a smile crossed Harriet's face. We maintain relationships with several youth orchestras, including one in Anchorage. I considered this acceptable, provided he has no influence over this orchestra's operations. None whatsoever, she assured me. Then we have a deal. I'll need the new contract before the showcase begins. Our lawyers are drafting it now. I nodded once. Tell the musicians, we begin rehearsal in 15 minutes. We'll focus on the opening and closing pieces. As Harriet walked away, I felt Miguel's presence beside me again. Did you just pull off what I think you did? He asked quietly. I watched Theo storm off the stage, defeat etched in every line of his body. The performance isn't over yet, I replied. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of focused rehearsal. By 11, when the donors began filing into the hall, we were as prepared as possible under the circumstances. I stood backstage, now dressed in my formal conducting attire, watching through a gap in the curtains as Ilyana welcomed the assembled wealthy patrons. The new contract sat signed in my bag. The orchestra waited behind me, instruments ready. Theo was notably absent. As Ilyana introduced me, emphasizing my visionary leadership, I took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The applause washed over me as I approached the conductor's podium. I raised my baton, made eye contact with Miguel in the first chair position, and we began. The music soared, imperfect in places, but passionate and alive. I guided the musicians through each movement, using the language we developed together over 3 years of collaboration. At intermission, I retreated backstage, only to find Gustav waiting nervously. I wanted to apologize properly, he said, and to ask, what happens now? To me, I studied him thoughtfully. That depends. Why did you want this position? I love music, he answered simply. I've admired your interpretations since you guest conducted in Vienna last year. Working with this orchestra, even as an assistant, would be an honor. I made a decision. Report to my office tomorrow at 9. We'll discuss the possibility of an associate conductor position. A real one, earned on merit. His face brightened. Thank you. I won't let you down. As he walked away, Ilyana approached. The donors are ecstatic. 3 have already increased their pledges. Good. She hesitated. About that folder. What exactly did you have? I merely smiled. The second half begins in 5 minutes. Shall we? The second half of the performance flowed like liquid gold. Whatever tension remained from the morning's confrontation had transformed into electric energy that vibrated through each note. The musicians played with a ferocity and precision that surpassed even our best rehearsals. When we reached the final crescendo of Mahler's Fifth Symphony, I felt the collective breath of the audience hold, then release in thunderous applause. A standing ovation, not just polite appreciation, but genuine awe. As I acknowledged each section of the orchestra, directing the applause toward the musicians who had stood by me, I caught sight of Harriet in the wings. She was beaming, already calculating the donation pledges this performance would secure. After 3 curtain calls, I finally exited the stage, my body humming with adrenaline and vindication. The musicians followed, exchanging excited whispers and triumphant glances. Ilyana intercepted me before I could reach my dressing room. Phenomenal, she gushed. Absolutely transcendent. The Carmichael Foundation just doubled their annual commitment on the spot. I nodded, accepting her praise with measured dignity. The musicians exceeded all expectations today. We're hosting a small reception for the top donors in the Platinum Lounge. Your presence would be invaluable. Of course, I replied smoothly. I'll join you shortly. In my dressing room, I changed quickly, choosing a sleek black dress that projected elegant authority. As I applied a fresh coat of lipstick, I caught my reflection smiling, a genuine smile, not the tense grimace I'd worn for months while sensing Theo's machinations. Miguel knocked softly before entering. You were magnificent, he said. We all were. Yes, I agreed. We reminded everyone why this orchestra matters. He hesitated, then asked the question I knew had been burning in everyone's minds. The folder, was it really what Theo thought it was? I met his eyes in the mirror. The reception's waiting. Walk with me? The Platinum Lounge buzzed with animated conversations as wealthy patrons discussed the performance, checkbooks metaphorically, and in some cases literally, open. I circulated smoothly among them, accepting compliments and discussing future programming with strategic enthusiasm. Each time someone mentioned the remarkable turnaround of the orchestra under my leadership, I silently cataloged it as another nail in Theo's professional coffin. 2 hours later, as the reception wound down, Harriet approached with a crystal flute of champagne. Preliminary numbers suggest we've secured funding for the entire next season, plus the European tour, she said quietly. The board is extremely pleased with today's outcome. I accepted the champagne. I'm glad to hear it. About Theo's reassignment, she continued, lowering her voice further. The Anchorage Youth Orchestra position has been confirmed. He'll be leaving next week. Good. Harriet studied me carefully. I've been on this board for 27 years, Miss Rousseau. I've never seen anyone maneuver quite so effectively. She tilted her head slightly. Those documents in your folder, may I ask what they contained? I smiled enigmatically. Insurance. Against? Further misunderstandings. Harriet's eyes crinkled with something between admiration and wariness. Well, whatever they were, they certainly had the desired effect. Theo looked like he'd seen a ghost. After the reception, I declined offers of celebration from several musicians and donors. The day's victory was sweet, but I needed solitude to process everything that had transpired. I walked alone through the now empty concert hall, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. On impulse, I climbed the steps to the stage, and stood at the conductor's podium, facing the empty seats. 3 years ago, I'd stood in this exact spot for the first time, terrified and exhilarated, certain I could transform this struggling orchestra if given the chance. Savoring the moment, I turned to find Ileana standing at the edge of the stage, her silk blazer catching the dim security lighting. "Just thinking," I replied. She approached slowly. "You know, when Theo first suggested bringing you on, I was skeptical. You were young, unconventional. He insisted you were exactly what we needed." She gave a humorless laugh. "Ironic that he then tried to dispose of you when you proved him right. Ambition is a curious thing," I said. "It can build or destroy with equal efficiency." Speaking of which, Ileana stepped closer. "I think we both know your folder wasn't just insurance." I remained silent. "The board believes you have financial improprieties on Theo. Embezzlement, perhaps, or misallocation of donor funds. Is that what they think? But that's not it, is it?" Ileana's gaze was penetrating. "Theo has always been meticulous with money, too cautious to risk financial misconduct." I ran my fingers lightly over the conductor's stand. "Does it matter what was in the folder if the outcome satisfies everyone?" "It matters to me," she insisted. "Because whatever leverage you hold, I need to know if it extends beyond Theo." Ah, there it was. Her real concern. "Why don't we discuss this in your office?" I suggested, more comfortable than an empty stage. 10 minutes later, we sat across from each other in the plush confines of the executive office suite. Ileana poured 2 fingers of scotch into crystal tumblers and slid one toward me. "I've always respected your talent, Aveline," she said. "Your musical genius is undeniable, but today revealed another side of you, one that, frankly, I underestimated." I sipped the scotch, letting it burn pleasantly down my throat. "Many people do." She leaned forward. "What was in the folder?" I set my glass down deliberately. "Nothing." Ileana blinked. "What?" The folder contained blank staff paper. Nothing else. Her expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally, dawning comprehension. "You bluffed?" I shrugged slightly. Theo needed to believe I had something devastating. The board needed to believe I had leverage. You needed to believe I was dangerous enough to accommodate rather than eliminate. The empty folder accomplished all of that. Ileana sat back, reassessing me completely. "But you seemed so certain, so prepared." I was certain of one thing, that Theo had acted without proper authorization from the board. His panic when confronted confirmed it. Everything else was orchestrated. A startled laugh escaped her. "That's actually brilliant. Sometimes the most devastating weapon is the one others imagine you possess," I said simply. Ileana raised her glass in a toast. "To imagination, then." I clinked my glass against hers. "And to new beginnings." After finishing our drinks, I gathered my belongings and prepared to leave. At the door, Ileana stopped me with a light touch on my arm. "For what it's worth, Theo did try to convince me to support your demotion. I told him to wait until the board could properly review his proposal." Her expression turned rueful. "He went around me, sent that email anyway. I only found out when the musicians started calling in panic. I studied her face for deception and found none." "Then I appreciate your restraint. The orchestra needs you, Aveline. I hope this unfortunate episode won't affect our working relationship moving forward." "That depends," I said candidly. "Will you respect the terms of my new contract?" "Completely." I nodded once. "Then we'll be fine." 3 months later, our first international tour under my new contract sold out in every city. Critics raved about our revolutionary interpretations and emotional depth. The New York Times called our performance at Carnegie Hall a revelation in orchestral expression. Theo, meanwhile, was struggling to connect with teenagers in Anchorage. According to former colleagues who kept in touch, his rigid traditional methods were failing to inspire young musicians accustomed to more innovative approaches. Enrollment in the youth orchestra had dropped 30% since his arrival. The most satisfying moment came when Gustav, now thriving as associate conductor after proving his genuine talent, forwarded me an email from his uncle. Theo was asking if there might be an opening for him back at the Philharmonic, as Alaska wasn't agreeing with him. Gustav's response, copied below Theo's desperate plea, was perfect in its simplicity. "I've forwarded your request to Principal Conductor Rousseau, as all staffing decisions fall under her artistic direction per her contract. I'm sure she'll give it all the consideration it deserves." I never responded to Theo's inquiry. The silence was my final note in our complicated composition. On the anniversary of that fateful email that had interrupted my Amalfi Coast vacation, I received a package. Inside was a bottle of limoncello and a card signed by every musician in the orchestra. Thank you for conducting us through the storm. That evening, as I sipped the bright, citrusy liqueur on my balcony, I reflected on how close I'd come to losing everything, and how a blank folder and unwavering confidence had turned potential disaster into triumph. Sometimes the most effective weapons in our arsenal aren't the ones we physically possess, but the ones others believe we might use. In Theo's case, his own guilty conscience had filled my empty folder with whatever he most feared being exposed. The orchestra continued to thrive under my direction, breaking attendance records and attracting world-class guest artists eager to perform with us. My unique notational system eventually became the subject of a music theory dissertation at Juilliard. And me? I finally took another vacation, a full 2 weeks in Vienna during the off-season. This time, I left my phone at home. If you've enjoyed this story of orchestrated revenge, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps me continue bringing these satisfying tales of justice served to your feed. Have you ever stood your ground against someone who tried to take credit for your work? Share your experiences in the comments below. I read every one. Until next time, remember, sometimes the sweetest symphony is the sound of karma coming full circle.